Hi, and thank you so much for tuning in to P2P Relates, where we talk about all things relationships. I'm Pat Renfro, and today we're going to be talking about the pandemic in a different way. I feel like we're in a dual pandemic. I feel like the information that we've gotten lately about one more killing is a pandemic. So here we are in the midst of coping. Three names come to mind: Jacob Blake, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. This stuff keeps happening. It just continues to happen over and over again. So I want to talk about 3 ways to manage your stress when you're in a situation where you've got just a piece of the puzzle and you can't get the other pieces. You can't solve the problem. What you can do. So I hope you'll stick with us. Just a reminder, P2P Relates is all about relationships. And when you think about it, we're constantly in a relationship of one type or another. Many times we're in relationships we didn't choose. And so managing ourselves as well as how we show up in those relationships is really critical. And right now we're dealing with a crisis in racism. I hesitate because I can call it so many things, but the reality is we've been dealing with this for centuries, not just decades. This is not new. The sad part is, I guess many of us thought that the movement that happened with Martin Luther King would resolve a lot of the issues. And when slavery was broken and we became supposedly free, then that meant that we would have the same rights and opportunities as all other races. And here we are in 2020, not even 2000, 2020. And we're still dealing with stuff we dealt with back in 1970, back in 1920, back in 1800s. I mean, it just keeps going. It's bad enough that we're dealing with a pandemic of health, that the whole world has suffered through this. But now we're looking at the fact that while we're in the midst of that pandemic, we're dealing with shootings and killings. And the thing that makes it so bad is we're looking at there's no repercussions for the cops going, oops, sorry, I didn't realize this, or we thought that, or our lives were in danger, or he wouldn't stop when we said it. And yet a man can come out vigilante with a gun, shoot people, but he's of a different hue, and he doesn't get arrested. He doesn't get oops, accidentally shot. This blatant racism that we're dealing with today is a travesty. It is, there really aren't sufficient words to describe just how horrible these things are. Things happen in life and we have to find ways to keep going. But when things like this are allowed to continue over and over again, you know what it says to me? It says, well, we can't keep those black people tied up. So let's find other ways to get to them. So what we'll do is we will put them in prison. And if there's only 30% of blacks in our city, that's okay to have 70% blacks in our prison because they are trouble. That's, for me to say that is maybe not the most politically correct thing to say. But you know what? When we look at the travesty of what is being allowed, that's what angers me and so many more people. I'm not alone. There's no repercussions. There's no consequences. There's no real accountability within the police force. Because if there were, those mistakes, those oops wouldn't keep happening. And if they did, they would happen across the board to whomever didn't stop when you said stop. But sometimes we don't stop, and sometimes we do run because we've been shot walking. We've been shot standing still. We've been shot with our hands up in the air. So I just wanted to be really clear about how I feel. I would love to hear from my audience. I would love to do a Q&A so that we could talk about relationship issues. So I invite you to put comments below and ask me any questions, whether it's self-development, self-esteem, friendship, dating, marriage, or business relationships. Send them forward and I will be glad to answer those questions for you. But today, talking about racism, what I wanted to do is give us 3 things to think about as coping mechanisms for when you really don't have anything you can do about it. One thing I would say is self-care. So self-care would involve sleep, good sleep, 6 hours minimum, some type of regularity in getting up as well as going to bed, because during this pandemic, for those who have been without work at home, and to a degree that's been a gift in some cases because you've gotten rest you haven't had for years possibly, but regulating those hours is really going to help you. The sleep and rest your brain so that you can get up and be productive. You need to first put your life seatbelt on before you can take care of any causes or take care of family. So self-care. The next thing is respond appropriately to issues. First, make sure you know as many facts as possible and not get caught up in the emotionalism of whatever press might say or what other opinions are. Get your own opinions, get your own facts. Once you're clear about how you feel, what you believe, what information you have, then the web is our friend. There are so many ways to find out what groups are already out there, what are they doing, how can you join in to be a part of something that's equivalent to your value system. Our stress. So that takes me right into the next thing. The first thing I should have said is pray. You know, in our life, we're going to be dealt a lot of hard balls. Think about baseball. Somebody throws you that ball at 90 miles an hour and you got to catch it. It may catch you. It may harm you. So you have to handle what comes at you the best way you can. And sometimes that means get out of the way. And sometimes it means roll up your sleeves and see how you can help. And sometimes it means that you need to pray. Pray first. God created this earth. And when we're in some of the roughest times, the most important thing we can do is pray and ask God to give us wisdom for how we would deal with a particular thing. How would He have us deal with it? And you would be amazed at what types of things He might have you do. So, and I think about the serenity prayer. What is it? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We've got to be willing to participate in change when it has to happen. But we have to also be okay when we cannot make a change. You can go crazy. You can lose your mind being frustrated and pent up about things you have no power over. So the most power you have is to pray. And after you pray, then you got to rest. You got to be able to stop and say, you know what? Let me do what I can. And what I can't do, they're going to reap what they sowed. We'll never see it maybe, but we all pay. We all pay. And so I hope this is helpful. You take care, and I'll see you next time. Hit the subscribe button, and you'll know when I've uploaded video. Hit the like button and share this with other people. Let them know. And don't forget, I really would appreciate your comments as well as your questions for future video. I'm going to do a Q&A soon where I'm doing all questions and answers. That way we're talking about what's of interest to you. All right, you take care. Thanks so much. Bye.